I was at just rock bottom. I had everything in life that every person had ever wanted. There is nothing that you could give for me that I didn't have. I had my health, physically, other than the anxiety, which was starting to fail my health. I had fancy houses, cars, multiple investments. I had cash. I had everything that I ever wanted, and I was the most miserable human that you could ever get, and I didn't understand. And I realized that I was likely to be the smartest person at my funeral because I would probably be the only person that was there.
Hey, welcome back again to the Stand Up Australia podcast. A little bit of a different one today with the ever-evolving nature of this show. We are having Jody Lowe on. We may have Robin join us a bit later on, but we're not really sure yet. I know she's pretty busy today. But yeah, you might be familiar with Jody Lowe from a few of our events and also with his things he's been doing with the ACA. But we find him pretty fascinating here at Stand Up Australia, and the rest of Australia does too, just with his activism, single man activism. I learned a lot last time from him when he was on a webinar with us, and I just thought, fantastic. Someone who's actually just, not just posting on Facebook or just talking to people. He's actually getting out there and making things happen. So welcome again, Jody, to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. It's always good to, like I said, do part twos. I speak a lot and I speak fast, so it's nice to always come back and sort of hit a few of those points home again for those that watched it last time or those that hadn't seen me. So, thank you for the opportunity.
No worries. I just wanted to sort of just get started and just get a bit of your background. I know if you've listened to Jody before, you would have heard it before, but I do think it's really important because a lot of the time we see people like Jody do stuff and we're like, oh, they must have had this experience doing this, or they must have a law background, or they must have been activists their whole life or whatever. I'm not going to be able to do that. So I find your story quite fascinating. Can you just, give us an A to Z of Jody so far?
Yeah, so I was born out in the middle of nowhere in central Queensland. Lived in a town or grew up in a town of 100 until I was about 8 years old. So definitely from that side of the railway track. I was fortunate enough that my stepdad and my mum moved to a small town in the Central Highlands, a small mining town where I spent 18 years there and ended up, just like the teachers said, because I didn't do well at school. I don't learn that way, and the system is designed to make sure that you're told that you're stupid the whole way through. And I've got a sarcastic nature about me, so I always made sure that they were pointed out just as of their flaws as much as they did mine. So I ended up being the coal miner that they said that I would if I didn't listen in school. And funnily enough, when you see the wage that the coal miners get, it's probably not that bad of a place to fail.
No.
Yeah, so I had I've lived so many different lives. Years and years ago, 25 years ago, I was 3 years into mining, spending all my money the way my family were. They were not frugal. They were spendthrifts. They would, they lived week to week. No savings, no investment. Just, that's just the old school way that they were. Drink it or gamble it away. So. And God bless them, they that was their life, but they didn't have debt and they didn't have credit cards. They weren't come from that society, so that they were just always one day away from waiting for the paycheck. And so I had grown up watching them do that sort of way, and had soon become that as a coal miner. And I was probably by 18, 19, I was terrible with because credit cards were around then. So not only was I spending all my money, but I was using credit cards. And my ex-in-laws at the time, they were farmers, and they said, he said, look, I've watched you muck around, wasting your time and your money for 3 years, but I had a beautiful baby girl by the time I was 20, so 1 month out of my 21st birthday. So that wakes you up a little bit pretty quickly, and that was also his signal to his daughter was 19 at the time, so small town, nothing else to do, not much TV on, so make babies, and so he got involved pretty quickly because he could see how wrong it could go quickly. I started sort of, it was like a rich dad, poor dad. I don't know if you've ever seen Robert Kiyosaki. That's he used to be one of the most famous sort of property investors back in the day.
Yeah, I've read Rich Dad Poor
Robert
Dad.
Kiyosaki's books. Yeah, Robert Kiyosaki's book series, Rich Dad Poor Dad, suited my life so well. One not quite the lines of the educated teacher that his dad was, and then the rich business entrepreneurial guy that his best mate's dad was, but it was a similar story for me. I had come from one side of the railway line, and now I was dealing with and educated from the other side. Farmers, very frugal, very hardworking, long hours for themselves, businessmen. And so, I basically flipped a switch and went from being a young ratbag, alpha football playing party boy to having to be a responsible dad, look after my money and start learning how to invest for the future. And I caught the wave of before Southeast Queensland sort of really went nuts. So I bought my first house in Southeast Queensland for a miserable $194,000 in Budrum. For all those people out there going, what? I can't get a
probably minimum $800,000 now for a house in Budrum.
Yeah, I can't get a shed for $194,000. Have you? Yeah, I was just going to say cool, because I'm sitting here talking to only myself. So if you could leave it there, I can feel like I'm talking to someone. So I sort of went down that track, and I ended up leaving mining. I bought a few properties, and I ended up going down south to a farm, and the family trust bought a farm for each of the kids, and we had to sell our properties to buy our asset, buy our share back in the asset. So I ran the family farm, one of the family farms, for a couple of years down there on the Murray River. And I learned a lot about environment and agriculture and water. And I'd been with that. They were farmers anyway, so I'd been out and around them for 6 odd years as they transitioned to a lot of the zero-till farming, like of all the new modern sort of farming methods, satellite navigated, zero-till. It's an amazing sort of system at the time, and it was just groundbreaking. And I'd already seen all that sort of stuff. I understood.
It's a regenerative farming.
Yeah. It's just the system had just completely got rid of all of the so much of the use of fuel and fertilizers and particularly poisons. Ripping all of our topsoil up and keeping it exposed to the elements all the time. So. And strip grazing was another thing that I did when I went down onto the farm. So I grew hay, I grew silage, which is wet hay, and I fattened cattle. But I only did one round of fattening cattle because I'm not I like to pretend that my meat comes in a little packet in the store, and I didn't want to be part of the growing them up, patting them on the head, and then sending them off to get their head knocked off. I'm the weirdest meat eater that you'll come across. I'm a fully aware but conscious driven meat eater. So I don't really know how that sort of works. It's like punching someone in the face at the pub and then helping them up and giving them ice pack is what it's sort of like. It's a bit of a contradiction in itself. But so I didn't gel well with ground meat. I went into the I had all the springers. I had all the milking, the pregnant milkers come over and basically looked after them in their off season from milking until they had a calf. When their milk would come in, and then they go back to their farm. So it was a lot gentler and a lot happier lifestyle for me, sort of looking after them. But yeah, I ended up getting out of the family business. Family business is not fun, especially as a young bloke who's gone from being an underground miner, a ratbag underground miner with lots of people around me for sarcasm and wit, to driving a tractor 13 hours a day on your own. Like
bit intense for you.
Yeah, and like no football, no league down there. It was only Aussie rules, so different nature, and sarcasm wasn't a thing in Victoria, in that sort of Victorian area. Like they did not get my humour. They were a lot politer, a lot more respectful sort of people down there than up here in the bush. We call where you call your mate a horrible word and call a complete stranger mate. So that's that was a big culture shift. But I just kept jumping through life in lots of different steps and stages, lots of trials and tribulations, lots of successes and lots of losses, until I eventually lost it all. Climbed to going pretty well with subdivisions and property and just learning as I was going. And I don't have any formal education, and I never did well at school. I just like to listen to what smart people say, and I like to watch how they do it. It's why I'm so good in this movement of knowing who's the talkers and who's the walkers, because I'm very good at parroting, I would say, rather than necessarily knowing. But I'm good at modeling myself around what good looks like. And then I just I shifted around into a mold until suddenly it fits for me and it makes sense, and then I can really stand on it and stand in there and start propagating that to make sure that I know that it works. And so I just got I don't know, I was doing all of that without any real education or anything like that. I mean, I had luck is something that you bring to yourself, so I put myself in a lot of those positions. But I had that farming family in the background too, which makes a lot of that a lot easier. So I've never been out there sort of beating my chest going, oh, I started with nothing and ended up with everything. I mean, without that family backing, I would have started with nothing and probably had something, but not everything. So I'm always conscious and always aware to keep my feet on the ground when it comes to.
Would you say you're the type
success.
of person? Well, sorry. Would you say you're the type of person that can really sort of look at a bunch of situations and just pick the best parts from each of those, and then create your own reality with it?
Yeah, I think it's finding a use for each part too. Like, I don't like to throw too much away, because intent is everything. So if there's a bad intent there, I'll get rid of it pretty quickly. If you can tell lies or manipulation or something like that, I'll chop that out. I'll cut that out like a cancer. The moment I have it in any workplace, or I have it in any lifestyles, friends, you can see that stuff pretty quickly, and my discernment gives me that power. And I could see it in other people for a long time, but I wasn't actually engaged in myself and my own heart anymore because of the trauma stuff that I had been through. So in the background, that people just don't realize how much that underlying trauma may allow you to see things, but realistically, you're seeing the flaws in yourself that you don't like mostly. So I didn't like thank you for that. I didn't like the flaws in myself, and the flaws in myself was that stuff. So luckily, when you understand what mirroring is about and what projection of your own issues are. Luckily for me, those things that my stepdad, he's passed now, but those issues that he had passed on traumatically to me, I was passing on inadvertently to people around me as well, my family, my wife, my workmates and stuff. So yeah, so I wouldn't say that I picked the best out of the things. I would say that at the time I was so heavily traumatized with when I finally sort of got that last 10 years of really bad mental health, really crippling depression and anxiety and panic attacks, that I had worked myself for so long on and prided myself on being right and being on top of it and not failing for so long, because my stepfather was such a person. If you were going to open your mouth, you better make sure what you knew, but you knew what you were talking about. So he was like me. He was like what I became. I became a verbal bully, and like he would just one of those people that would just roll of the eyes would be enough to scar you. Shake the head, the sigh. That just that debilitating sort of thing. And I've long forgiven him and understood what was, and I never got to work with him like I work with most people now when I do help people with trauma and realization. But yeah, I mean, the best part of that was it made me the person that I am, because I do see risk differently. I can smell bullshit a mile away. I do try my best to get as much information before I start speaking on something, and try not to let my intent fail me, if you know what I mean. Like, make sure that if my words are coming out of my mouth, why? What is the intent of me saying this sort of stuff? Like, why am I doing this interview? Because I think my journey is worth sharing to people, so that they might have the courage to know that we are not human, that we all have flaws, that we do have to go through trials and tribulations. You can't have the peaks without having the troughs. I like I said, my intent is to always share the story to say you might not succeed and fail in the way that I did, but knowing that you will is something that you can get comfortable with, because it's the point of this journey is to not be scared of trying something for the fear of failing at it. And each puzzle piece that I've gained in everything that I've been doing in my life, trials and tribulations, winnings and losses, everything has given me a little puzzle piece that at no stage during the time that I was in did I know what it was for. And as I evolve into some sort of speaker in this motion and this movement at the moment, each time I put a puzzle piece in there and they fit, I'm like, I wouldn't have that vision of this picture if I hadn't have gone through that part, which gave me that puzzle piece. So a lot of people will throw those puzzle pieces out because it will remind them of a bad time, or
or it doesn't fit their reality at the time.
Or they'll idolize the puzzle piece of the good time, and they'll always want to just replicate that puzzle piece, and it won't give you a real picture of your life. It'll just give you lots of these stupid puzzle pieces that don't make sense. And so you'll always be looking to repeat the same thing. And if it failed, if there was a reason why that isn't part of your life anymore, then you're also repeating the same thing that made it fail, because you're not looking at the big picture. So that's probably the best way that I would explain, how I got where I am.
Yeah, it's a good thing what you've done, because I find especially with men, a lot of men. I'm blessed enough to have quite a few mates who are very much like yourself, who are willing to learn and never sort of think they're right about something all the time, and are willing to look at themselves in the mirror, learn from their mistakes and all that. But I find, especially with a lot of men, a lot of us, our age of growing up that way, where it's not cool to sort of be wrong, and it's not cool to sort of show your real feelings to one another, or not be perfect all the time, or not be right all the time. That does cause a lot of mental anguish in a lot of people, a lot of depression in men, and I'm sure women too. I can't speak because I'm not a woman, but I certainly do sympathize with what you said there, because been through the same stuff before. Mental health is in the bin. No good. Anxiety. Health, even sort of physical health problems, which I had to work on. But that comes with being able to look at yourself in the mirror, like you said, and be able to learn from other people, even if you don't agree with them.
Yeah, and it's been like you have to tear yourself back down to the core to start rebuilding. If you I believe that everybody does, even if you are living through the segment of your life where it's the good part, it might be really good part. Not many people that I know have always lived the good life all the time, because even when you talk to them, their bad part might be someone else's best part. But at the end of the day, it's in their mind, it's still a bad part. Do you know what I mean? I'm earning a fortune as a coal miner, living in a almost free house, driving a fancy car with three at the time, but then now 4 beautiful, healthy kids and a lovely wife and a loving mother. And I'm suffering the bouts of anxiety and depression where I'm literally driving past trucks with my knees on the steering wheel because I trusted that they wouldn't pull the wheel, that the voice in my head was sort of like, yeah, just tug it. What, just tug the wheel, and so like people from the outside, who are living in, some sort of government provided accommodation where they're getting broken into and robbed, and, there's abuse and violence and drugs and stuff like that. They're looking at me going, whinging, talking when I was doing my mental health videos, and, they're looking at me going, this guy's he's not legit. He's earning freaking money like it's coming out of his ass. He's got fancy shit. And I'm saying to him, like, it don't matter. Like my worst day might be your best day, but your mind is a powerful tool. It will, Robin Williams was a great classic example. I mean, like he ended his life. There's been a lot of them, that have ended their lives because we don't really understand how powerful that mind is when it gets when it turns on you. So yeah, I'm grateful that I've been through it. But yeah, I lost it. I think I lost
What was the turning point? What was the
Oh,
turning point for you though? You get into that hole. It's hard to get out for a lot of people.
So I had 100 people working for me. I had 60 people working for me in the mines, and I was solely in charge. I hired them, fired them, got them their uniforms, trained them, planned their work for them, executed it with them. I did that for 5 years in the bout of my starting with my depression and anxiety. And the more triggered I was, and the more stressed I put on myself, the mine was useless at asking me to get shit done. I put that pressure on myself because of the trauma that I had from my stepdad. That if you're going to do something, you got to do it right. Something worth doing is worth doing right. At the same time as he would say things like, better the world think you're a fool than open your mouth and remove all doubt. So I was always constantly aware that if I was going to do something, I had to do it well. If I was going to say something, I had to walk my talk. And so I held myself to ridiculously high standards that my body just couldn't physically keep up with. You know what I mean? Like I would burn the candle way past both ends for people who just didn't give a shit. Like the industry just didn't give a shit. We had record 600 days in the first group. We were 600 days without a HPI, a high potential incident, a restricted injury, or a lost time injury, which are the three big key markers for mining. And we did it under budget on time. And so that should be heralded. But I was hated because I was doing it with an iron fist. And so I moved over to another department, and then my new boss, he said, "I love what you do." He's a Yankee ex-military man, so obviously he likes that sort of regiment control sort of structure. You know what I mean? Like I still to the day don't think that they had it that bad. I mean, like they got multiple if it was a normal workplace, it wouldn't be seen that bad. I mean, just coal miners have just got soft over the years, and as wokeism sort of gets into my feelings are hurt. I used to be talking to them sometimes, and people would be upset, and I'd be like, "God, you have no idea the way the miners used to talk to me back in the day." So what I'm saying to them, I felt was like warm and fuzzy compared to the way that I was. We were physically accosted if we got it wrong underground, because you can kill a lot of people if you get it wrong. You know what I mean? Like in an underground mine. And so I took over a new group, a new 100, and I had a small team of management underneath that. So I sort of looked after the team, but because I'm a micromanager in some respect, they would just bypass the team that I looked after and come directly to me, and I was making decisions without consulting the team. I knew it was right, but I knew that it was wrong to do that. So, I was just creating enemies wherever I went. My family didn't know me anymore. I was super invested in it. I had, was working 60 hours at that job. I had a subdivision company that I was trying to do a subdivision, a 16 lot subdivision over here. I, eventually had decided that I should also start a mental health company and build an app at the same time as doing the other things, because my mental health needed more things to stress me out about and more things to spend money on. So yeah, it was just escapism. It was just distracting me because I couldn't stand the sound of my own, the voice in my own head. Because that's that traumatic sort of that voice. So yeah, I kept pushing until the team that I worked for and with, we had 550,000 hours of work underground, without an injury, without the lost time, without the damage. Millions and millions under budget year after year, and I still was the most hated person on site. And by now, then my wife was completely lost to me. She was, only through her trauma of her life growing up, was she able to tolerate what I'd become. My children, who were already sort of not estranged to me, but I'd been an uncle to them, realistically, as I'd traveled around with different businesses and stuff and lived away from them. I hadn't been a dad to them for a long time, but once my ex had taken them away from me years before. And so, yeah, I just got to the point one day where I'm just like, I was just rock bottom. I had everything in life that every person had ever wanted. There is nothing that you could give for me that I didn't have. I had my health, physically, other than the anxiety, which was starting to fail my health. I had fancy houses, cars, multiple investments. I had cash. I had everything that I ever wanted, and I was the most miserable human that you could ever get, and I didn't understand. And I realized that I was likely to be the smartest person at my funeral because I would probably be the only person that was there. That was it. Like, I had alienated, my mental health had alienated without me even realizing what that it had, because the more it hurt me, the more I dove into my work, the more triggered and anxious and angry that I was, and on edge. And so I just was like, okay. And in walks my beautiful daughter, Indiana, at my 40th birthday, turning 41, and in comes this beautiful little girl into my life to ground me back into what I knew that I was good at, which was being a father, actually engaged in being a father. And it took me a year to sort of go, man, I can't be this person. Like, my older girls had grown up, but I couldn't be this person and have this young kid around. I wasn't engaged with her. I wasn't connected with her. I was there, but I wasn't there. So I basically said, change now. And I'm trying to explain to my older girls, and it's a family issue. Like, apparently there's a lot of this in our family. And God forbid the system would ever ask all of the Lows to get together and test us together and to see if there's something common, even though they would say that genetics do not play a part in depression and anxiety. And yet most of the family that I'd heard of after 5 years of having anxiety and depression, like not before, told me that, they've all got some sort of medication. They've all got some sort of thing going on. I'm like, well, that kind of sounds like it's family orientated, but so I started making videos. I started my own mental health company, and I started making videos at the same time as making an app. And at the time, I needed to rebalance myself with the principles: spiritual, physical, intellectual, financial, and emotional. They were the 5 pillars of all the things I'd looked around at, all of the different things that were out there. I realized that I had to get myself back in balance, because what we were seeing was like a shitty generator that has these massive spikes in energy. And you have these massive highs where I would burn all of my energy, and then, because I was feeling good, and then the inevitable drop would come down to where I would be feeling shit for a couple of days. And then as soon as I'd start feeling good, I'd have the high. And so I was basically like a computer, that if you plugged a computer into an old shitty generator like that, you're going to burn out the system pretty quickly, because it doesn't like the low voltage, and it doesn't like the high voltage. It doesn't like the spikes. So what you wanted, what you needed to do is have that sine wave type energy where it's just, pretty close to the middle. So I was wrongly trying to stop, trying to protect myself on the low, trying to recoup energy there, trying to do something, trying to take supplements, trying to take coffee to bend that, trying to take caffeine to bend those loops. And I was wrong. I actually needed to, when I work on the up, I can't get my bloody fingers right because this thing's in reverse. You can see me going. But I was having to, I'll do it with 2 hands so I can sort of line it up. So I was having to curve that at the top end when the energy was there. And that's really hard when you live an anxious, depressed state, because when you finally feel good, I mean, you would know this, when you finally feel good, you want to get out, you want to have some fun, you want to be around people, you want to exercise, you want to eat good food, because you get all your senses back, you get your taste back, you get clarity back, you want to work on a book that you wanted to work on, you want to do everything there, because it's
hard to say no to anything, isn't it?
Days, it's bound to be the down. It is, because you just feel good for change. I mean, it's like taking an ecstasy tablet and sitting down and watching a Netflix movie. It's like, what? And I'm not promoting drugs. But you know what I'm saying is, like, you to feel so good, and like, and my wife's like, okay, you need to understand your own energy, and because you take so many supplements and take so many uppers and downers and that sort of stuff, you don't know when your own energy even is. Like, you just got this erratic levels of energy up and down, and peaks and troughs. And am I tired, or am I just caffeine's run out, or am I adrenal fatigued, or am I what am I? And so I had those 5 principles back then, I had no idea what they meant. I just wrote them down because they sounded good when I was going to start making my company. I wanted to have something to look at. Sorry. And so I started making videos. And I remember the very first video that I made, I'd made a couple of videos just around talking about mental health and my journey. People didn't understand me at work. People were never going to resonate with me because I was still saying it from an angry place, and hurt people. So it still had that. And you all will always hear the arrogant tone that I have. You'll hear the strong, undertone of a potential narcissist, because it's a protection mechanism inside of me that I have to be very careful doesn't automatically turn on. I've got to make sure that's a manual switch, because my default is attack anything that looks like it's going to hurt me. So it's known to me. It's what people need to do. But yeah, I guess I just sort of started doing these videos, and then I wanted to, what could I offer spiritually? Nothing. I'd grown up in a complete atheist type family, maybe not necessarily denouncing the existence of anything, but just having no real talk to it. My grandma used to have a Bible and read the Bible, but I don't ever remember anything in my life ever even talking about it, not a single spiritual conversation. So I had nothing to offer that. Intellectually, I knew that I was capable of learning, having the right teacher, but I had become so devoid of any reality, any grasp on what the world really was, or anything deeper than my day, because, when you spend all day with adrenaline, you're only ever in this part here. There's no deep thought there. It's only reactive thought. So I'd done that for 10 years now. I hadn't really been able to deep think about anything. So there was nothing there to offer. Financially, I had massive successes and wins, but I'd also lost everything. I had lost $400,000 in one business for the last of my money after divorce. Lost it all in 2 years of bloody hard work. And I was that close to bankruptcy, it wasn't funny. So financially, I'm like, shit, did I actually ever even know anything about real markets or change or systems or anything? Or did I just get a boogie board and catch a lucky wave? You know what I mean? Like those, just a random wave, and people went, oh, good body surfing. Great work, Jody. And I'm like, yes, I'm a national treasure. I can do this shit for days, and I could never catch another wave. And then emotionally, well, that's probably the hardest thing that people will ever realize is just how easily controlled we are when we don't actually understand our emotions. When we don't feel comfortable talking about them and we hide them, that shit just festers. And when you show them behind the curtain, you don't often have a look back there and go, oh, shit, there's a lot back there. Like, oh shit, there's way too much back there. It just, one day the curtain just tears down and the whole lot falls on top of you, and you're like, you got to try and sort that shit out before you're at work, before you're at a place where you don't want that shit to come out. So so that was me.
It's tough, that one, isn't it? It's tough, that one. I think we all know someone that sort of is a bit too emotional and complains a little bit too much. And when you do have those people in your life, you're hesitant to really talk about your emotions because you're like, oh, I don't want to be that person. But you're not. If you're just getting it out there and you're just talking about what's bothering you, it's very important to do that, especially with people that you love, so they can understand you better and you can understand yourself.
Yeah, and I think the trick that a lot of people need to learn is that if you spend more time looking and talking to yourself inwards than projecting what you think your thoughts are outwards, you'll get a better result. So our brain, from what I can understand, likes to be in control. That frontal egoic sort of thing, that protection mechanism likes to be in control of what we're saying. And if we don't get control of the intent of the conversation, quite often you'll find that even when you're talking to someone about, how hard you've got it, you'll pretty quickly get ego start taking over the conversation, because someone else will say, oh yeah, look, I understand that you've had a tough time, but my time's been tougher. No, my time's been tougher. My time's been tougher. Like husband and wife are a great example of it. they start off thinking that they're going to have this, emotional conversation with each other on the couch, and 10 minutes into it, they're barneying because it's like, you don't understand how hard it is to stay home with the kids. You don't understand how hard it is to work 12 hours. And so instantly you haven't actually got control of your emotion, which means that your physical state can be changed by someone else's control mechanism, which is really just you having that button proud up here. So realistically, what I've learned the most is that I don't need to talk to someone about this. I need to understand my own deeper concept of reality back here. And to do that, I need to shut up, which is very hard for me. But I need to be able to go back and have silence and hear what my true thoughts are, because I'll explain it this way. When I do training for supervisors and coordinators, years ago, I famously did this in front of some senior people from Brisbane in the BHP business. And they were doing a presentation, and they asked, what is the definition of culture? And I put my hand up, and every manager in the room was like, not him, not him, not him, and they're like, the guy up the back there. And I'm like, yeah, me. And they're like, anyone else? Anyone else out there? Anyone else? Because they know what I'm like. I don't have a filter. And I finally got to be the person that was picked. And I said, I want you to answer this question in your mind. Do not say it out loud. I said, what do you call a Muslim on the moon? And they just melted. All of these people melted. The wokesters. They're all like, oh, this is going south. And I said, an astronaut. And they're all like, looking at each other like, that's weird. And I said, my belief of culture is your first answer that comes to your mind, your first response. Culture is what you hear around you and what you see around you, but not necessarily what your core belief is. So I said, if you can train your workforce that their first reaction in safety and that sort of stuff is to do something safe. But if you see that they don't do something safe, that that culture is bad or culture is poor. And so that's always been the way that I explain that sort of stuff. I lost.
Yeah. No, well, that sort of ties into what you're doing now. You talked about the people that say and the people that do. So that's perfect, isn't it? It describes what's happening right now around us, where we have more talkers than doers. Unfortunately, that's probably 99 to 1 at the moment, the talkers to the doers. Luckily for us, the doers are very, very good at doing.
Yeah. And I think it's always been like that 80-20 rule, but that's what been my biggest mission in the background is like, I'm talking, and your government's got to do this, and world people got to do that. But the cold hard reality is I spend most of my time in my own head working on myself. I'm a bigger critic of myself than anyone else. They can call me arrogant, narcissist, whatever they want. And I don't really necessarily disagree with that. I measure it when I start getting like that, because I know that I have that capability. And if people don't think that leaders have got that capability, then you're wrong. There's something innately ingrained in us that says, if you're going to do the work and you've got the answers and people are backing you, that somewhere along the line you've got to keep checking yourself and keep your feet on the ground to say that you're doing it for the right reasons. And that comes from like I say, it's knowing the deeper thoughts in your head and not allowing that quick response until you have the culture of your situation under control, where the quick response is the right response. If you're talking it all the time, if you're around people all the time that you can trust to talk the same way, if that is the culture of your group, say the ACA, the Aligned Council of Australia, if that is the culture of them, that the goal is always the people, the goal is always the protection, then you know that the moment someone puts you on the spot and says, what can you tell me about the Aligned Council of Australia? And I'd say, well, we're a group of people that represent the people that blah, blah, blah. So you know that you can speak quickly out of the front without having to go like Elon Musk. And you have these awkward silences while you're waiting for him to answer, because he doesn't ever want to answer from there. He always goes back here, but it's just like, is he frozen? Like when he's answering. But, so I spend more time going quiet, trying to go into the back of my mind, trying to go inwards to be comfortable with that voice. And that's why my wife helps me. She has been the greatest help, in the world with being able to, she's an energetic clearer. So she will clear bad energy and bad frequency interference from the energetic body. I believe in something different to a lot. I believe that we have three systems sort of overlapping each other. I believe We have an energetic body that is connected to our emotional body, that is connected to our physical body. I think energy is something that everybody can believe in. It's always called something different. It might be called source, it might be called soul, it might be called spirit, but it's basically what everybody's belief is, that there's an underlying thing that, you know, we are a collective energy having an experience in a meat suit. You know, and it really doesn't, you don't have to go too far to find in most religions the explanation of something inside us, because you wouldn't, you know, it's not our meat suit that goes to heaven in a God's world. It's not in a spiritual world. It's not a meat suit that goes back to the dimensions above us and that sort of stuff. Most of them believe that this is some sort of broadcast energetic connection, soul source to this body. What we find, what I found during this journey, was my wife has taught me, and she has learned and then taught to me, is that those energetic blockages where interference are at is usually where you will see emotional problems. And so the more you turn away from the spiritual grounding type, earthly type nature type way of this universe and world, you'll start to see energetic blockages, that something just doesn't feel right. And it usually will promote an emotional response in you. And people would say it's, you know, it's probably, you know, the menopausal type things, the nature, the midlife crisis, the, you know, just the different things that you see with going on. And the biggest thing that I believe in the energetic world is that we have deliberately or undeliberately had our center disconnected. Because if you can imagine the trauma that you've gone through and the trauma that other people have gone through, what's the first thing you need to do when you're dealing with the trauma is you have to disconnect your heart space. Because you can't live in a life where you're just absolutely crying and burning and upset all the time. You've got to go to school. You've got to go to work. You've got to represent in front of your family and represent in front of your friends. So the easiest way to do that is turn that off. So, and I will say that in a two-dimensional sort of way, where it's just easiest to understand. But you're turning that part off. And the three systems that I think that we need to rely on when we're making judgment in a community is the mind, the heart, and the stomach. Now that can sort of lead to people with chakras and all the different sorts of energetic bodies that you see when you Google energetic body or something, spiritual body. But for me, when I hear information or when something makes me feel a certain way, I believe that my stomach is my discernment. Okay, so my stomach is telling me something's not right, or do I need this information, or is this right for me? My stomach's usually saying that. My heart is usually like, give them a chance, sweetheart, you know, just, you know, like, be kind, you know, that sort of thing. And my brain's usually like, this is bullshit, punch him in the face and get out of here. You know, like it's, you know, the way that the three work, that you need all of them to make your decision. But I say discernment, intuition, and intent. Because I know that if I discern my information correctly, and if my heart is actually open to be empathetic, if I've actually reconnected it and allowed that trauma to be able to pass through me, I know that I won't skip the step where my mouth is operating off this cultural reaction piece, where my ego has usually got most of the control. So I know that I know that through my systems in my body, I know that I've made the decision to open my mouth with the best intent, and that is the best thing for the universe, to put the energy back out into it, rather than just spite, spit, hate, anger, revenge, all of those low vibrational sort of things that you see in the energetic world. I hope that
Isn't
makes
it funny
sense.
too? Like, these things are like, they're known without us even knowing it. We use these terms like go with your gut or your heart or your head. You know, you got your logical in your head, your emotional in your heart, and you've got your intuition is your gut. And if you think about those, like you just said, those three centers, we all know this instinctively. When you rediscover it, or when you just discover that you do know it, it's so powerful.
Yeah, and that's why I say I try not to. I don't care how you describe it. I don't care what your religious belief, what your what your background is. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm just lucky enough to have a blank canvas when I started this little journey 4 years ago, and I'm just trying to understand exactly like I said, just taking other people's concepts and ideas and making it into mine, because you can't stand for something if you don't truly believe it and you can't explain it to anybody. So that's when you know you're being indoctrinated into something. If you don't like it being challenged and you can't heartfelt explain it to a really strong degree, it's like, here's a little bit of detail, and someone asks a second question, and you're like, oh, you just have to have faith. Hang on, that doesn't sound like you have a conviction for it. That just sounds like you're a follower. You know what I mean? So, if you can't explain the functionality of what it is that you're doing, I mean, how do you be a motor mechanic? And like, hey mate, what are you doing in there? I've just got to take this part off because I've got to put that part in there. Well, what's that part? Look, mate, just read the manual. Like, that's just what I've got to do. You'd be straight away going, oh, that guy doesn't sound like he knows what he's talking about. You know what I mean? So, and not everybody's going to be able to explain in the eloquent way that some of the speakers out there do. I mean, I'm certainly not that. I have slowly but surely tried to use my mouth a little bit more, so I haven't got that drawl like I've had a stroke, with my mouth only half open over here, like the typical bushy.
The Queensland drawl.
Myself in a lot of these videos. I watch myself in a lot of these videos, and my mouth's not even barely opening, mate, and I'm just talking like this because I've got my hat up and bloody sideways. So I'm conscious of it.
People will think you've had a Pfizer vaccine or something.
Yes, correct. I say a lot, and so there you go. I just said straight off the bat, and so I've got to work on that sort of stuff. So, but it's all about working on me and being the best version of me. And so even the app and the website became about better, not best, because nobody ever hit their best golf score and then gave up golf. They went back the next day to be better. And so the social media was really brought into play at a time when it was necessary to continue to divide us and continue to traumatize us and continue to trigger us to make us believe that we were never good enough. And maybe it wasn't nefarious that way, but most of the businesses that make the money off keeping you on there never quite happy. Why don't you have abs at 50? Why do you have wrinkles at 60? Why aren't you an overnight success with doing this online business? And the Joneses were 6 houses around you when you were a kid to keep up with. And now it's 6,000 fake friends posting every day. They're on holiday. They got a new car. They got a new pet. They've just won the lotto. They got a new job. They got their boobs done. They've had their eyebrows, raised. They've, look at my face. So the Joneses became thousands of people constantly reminding you that your life just isn't good enough and that you need to strive harder and work, and so delayed gratification became something we didn't need to do because we had credit cards and we had buy now, pay later sort of thing. So you could live the Instagram life on tick and post those photos while completely and utterly being devoid of true connection to your emotions, because again, they were just getting straight behind the veil. Now that wasn't me, and it's not everyone, but you can just see how a generation of kids can start to find a new way to traumatize themselves. So that's just that constant reminder that they're never good enough. And so that was what the 5 principles were for, because Average AF is the company name, because I realized that if you give equal amount of time to each of those principles and truly start to know your relationship to them, you cannot be good at them. You cannot be the best at them, because 20% of the time is all you've got to spare for each of them if you were to give them equal amount of time. And so when you talk about the emotional person that you were saying before, that, just is always too emotional and, always whinging and always crying and that sort of stuff, that's just leaning into something too much, because they are not fulfilling their time in one of these other avenues. So they're not good physically, and they're not good, which, physically we know has a big connection through the stomach and through the mind and through the heart, that they have a physical connection to the emotional body. So the more emotional issues you have, the more blockages you have, you more end up in the physical nature having dis-ease, not a disease, but having dis-ease, something in your body is not working the way that it's intended to, and the energy that underpins this meat suit is not getting through properly to keep your systems, when you talk about your fight or flight, or you talk about your sympathetic nervous system and those sorts of things, they are driven by emotions. If you have too many spiking emotions, you'll have an anxious type response. You know what I mean? So you see how energy blockage, emotional problems causes dysfunction in the synergy of the actual body. And I don't have the right to talk about any of this stuff. I'm a meathead coal miner, but I'm just learning from myself and using myself as a template. And I spend most of the time out of my own body watching my reactions these days, rather than just blindly driving. You know what I mean? Like flat out not being able to see that the bridge is out.
But you're just as qualified as anybody else to make those comments, though.
Correct. I'm a human being that's experiencing life through the five senses of a meat suit.
You've been in the school of life. Yeah.
And I have the right to talk about mine, which is why I say that I'm just trying to let people draw parallels to their life, not say this is the way. That's what I don't like a lot. I do lean into the broad nature of, you need to work on yourself and get rid of the trauma. That is a directive when I sort of say it forcefully like that. And people be like, no, I don't. I need to focus on the government. The government have done this. Kill the government. Pull them down. And you've not done anything. You've got no part to play in this. If I give you a brand new government tomorrow, everything will be rosy and your life will be wonderful. Oh, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is correct. You're the victim, and you're quite happy to offload your obligations to somebody else for the healing and for the fixing that needs to be done to make your life what you want it to be. That is the pure principle of overreach of governance, because they want you to feel like somebody else has to solve your problem. Your home, you can't afford your rent. Here's a check. You're a single mum. Here is a check. You haven't got a job, as a father. Here is a check. It's always looking to make sure that the untreated responsibility of your own traumatic or triggerable symptoms are handled by a handout from the government, which gives them the power to continue to overreach, to say, you need us to maintain and control your life because you have no self-governance.
It's so ingrained, isn't it, in our society? It's so ingrained. Like something as simple. I'm pretty sure we actually spoke about this on the webinar as well. But something as simple as Woolworths and Coles and the supermarkets charging too much or price gouging. So everybody's like, "Oh, you got to do something about it." Government step up and penalise them. It's like, if you don't like it, don't shop there. We've spoken about this a fair bit. It's up to you personally. Don't give the government the power to do this stuff. Don't give it to them. Just take the power yourself and make the change yourself. Stop doing it.
Yeah, there's 27 million people in the country and 151 federal members. Why do I need 151 federal members to do something about something that 27 million people pay these people to take our money? So I spend I did a live yesterday where I talked about this, and I said I want everybody to understand that if you're still just sharing, if you're still fighting this fight the same way you were personally and energetically as you were last year, prove me wrong. Write yourself a list of what you've changed in your life in the last year. Of all the things that we now know, we're just over consumed with information. Every message I get is another link to another video, giving me another way to describe how the nefarious globalists are, in charge of our country, blah, blah, blah. There's only so much of it you can know, right? So the big picture. The big picture is very clear to us that we have been asleep for a long time and they are taking advantage of it. Done. So where is the line in the sand where you actually start taking action and changes to stop making them accountable for what they've done and start making yourself accountable for the recovery of what you've done? So I say write a list. So I wrote my list of the last 14 months, and it was things like, I've given up alcohol. I'm 2 weeks off a year. I've given up the caffeinated soda. First time in my life since I was about 17-year-old. 2 weeks off a year. I've stopped shopping Woolworths and Coles completely. Don't go in there. Have get 80% of my groceries through organics. We have filtered water. I've got rid of my credit card. I've sold my toys. I've got shut down 2 companies. I've left 2 major banks. I've got 2 to go. I have got self-managed super fund now into things that are outside of cash. I exercise 3 times a week. This is the stuff that like we homeschool my daughter. We took our daughter out of the school system and homeschool. I've reduced my working hours from 55 hours a week to 42 so that I can spend at least 10 hours a week doing things like this. It's a big financial burden for me to do it, but it's so worth it for my daughter's future, my children's future, my grandchildren's future. And so that to me, and then I'm like, okay, so what's my next year look like? Okay, so I want to keep working on my public speaking. I'm terrible at public speaking, terrified of it. Sit here like this all day long, but if you put me in front of a crowd of 50 people where they're expecting me to say something wonderful, I will fail. I'm terrible at it. I don't like it. So I want to work on that public speaking. I feel like I've got a little bit of a calling for that. But at the same time, I want to start removing myself from the rates debacle, the income tax debacle. To do that, I had to sell a few of my toys to have the funds to buy my business partner out for this property that I'm on at another massive loss to myself. But I can't take the courts on legally and have his name dragged into to fight something that he's a part in. So I've got to get him out of it, and he knows why. So I've got to get him out of it so I can start fighting the legal fight to say rates are illegal, income tax is illegal, and take the next step. So they're my goals for next month, while continuing to offer a viable place for people as they wake up to become active, considering that this is like a running race, as they wake up and people run over to them and they forget how much information they've taken in the last 4 or 5 years or 20. But, if I was to, this was your first conversation with me, Mitch, and you're just waking up to it. And I'm like, you go, man, I just heard about what's going on with the vaccinations being, shit. What can you tell me about it? Well, it's the World Health Organization's pandemic preparedness treaty and the IHR laws of 304 of them that are about to go through. But don't worry, because Article 55 is the problem that we've got. And we're going to be talking about this as we go to the federal election. And then, and you'd be just like, whoa. But it comes off our tongue because we've been doing it for 4 or 5 years. All of us, are well versed in it. So we've got to create a safe place to land for these people as they're, as they're finally waking up. Because Christ, every time I thought I was knowing something 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, today, I know nothing. Do you know what I mean? Like I know nothing except that the action needs to be taken. Faith is good to have, but it still requires action to defend it. At no time in my knowledge of history has faith alone been enough to win the physical war. It might have rewards for people in the afterlife, but it does not win the war in the physical. So we need to make sure that we don't start a civil war. We need to make sure that we don't scare them back into shoving their heads back into the sand. We don't say from a point of ego, we told you so, because that's not good. And we don't let the power of the pendulum swing from one side rapidly back to the other, which is what they love. They love swinging that pendulum back and forth so that the people in the middle, the true 80% of this country, always feel disconnected and always feel volatile and never really feel like the stability, because the power is just swinging so rapidly between everything. That's, you know what I mean?
Yeah. My wife sent me a meme the other day, and it was a jar of ants. And you might have seen this before, but it's got the caption: black ants and red ants are sworn enemies. You put them in a jar, they won't fight with each other. You close the lid and shake the jar, they'll tear each other apart. But it's not the ants. It's not the ants that are making each other fight. It's the hand that's shaking the jar. And that's exactly what's happening in our society. Correct. And if we continue to have a go at each other, if we continue to say, "Oh, you vaxxers are, you're stupid, you're idiots," knowing who doesn't know that majority of people that got the bloody thing in the first place did it because they needed to keep their home, they needed to clothe their kids, they needed to feed their family. If you don't know that, then do some research. Seriously. And
and
just
that's
calling people idiots because they did it is not going to solve our problems. It's going to make things worse.
well, that's the SGA. There's a group with a massive following, the Suddenly Gone Australia group, and they 90% of their posts of people dying at a young age that a year ago or 2 years ago said proudly that they'd had the vax. So now every death is associated with that, and I'm like, come on, like we were against the government using medical data that people died with COVID, and they were telling us that they died of COVID. So they bolstered those numbers to 97% of that was just fake shit. You have a car crash and you died of COVID, but it would be died with COVID. And I'm like, so if your intent is just to reverse that power now that you've got a media presence or a following, if you're only just doing exactly what they did, are we any better than them, or are we just the opposite of them? In a world of duality, is it always good and bad, or is it just positive and negative? Like, I mean, like if you're just using the same tactics to lie and use misinformation and disinformation, are we going to learn anything more, or are we just going to swing the power? If I give you the axe tomorrow and you've got all the information comes out, do we go out and run them all down and kill them all and string them all up? And, is that any better for the future of our world, or is there, something to be learnt about yourself in that manner? So sharing, if you're not an echo chamber, who's coming to your page? Someone new that just woke up to the fact that they've been coerced into having these jabs that they didn't want to, and now they've had enough and they've gone, I can't take it anymore. Another interest rate rise on the thing, and I need to find myself a conspiracy theory friend. And they open up SGA and go, oh my God, I'm going to die. Every minute of the day, I'm going to die. Every post is about me going to die. When am I going to die? Like, I don't see that. If you're going to post that, that's fine. But the second post after that should be a link to the protocol that we've seen plenty of good people, including the Australian Medical Professional Society, coming out with natural ways to combat issues and spike proteins and what to look for. So yes, we can acknowledge that people are dying from the jab, but no, we shouldn't be just writing that every single person that dies in the world today is because they had a jab, because that's 80%. Like, I mean, statistically, it's what it's going to be anyway. Like, 80% of the people, that died, if we were anti-red meat, we would be like, 80% of the people that died, today, he died, and within the last week, he ate a piece of steak. And they're like, what? Yes, you wouldn't believe it. In the last month, every person that's died in Australia has eaten red meat. So red meat must be a contributing factor to the death. And you'd be like, well, that doesn't sound, right. Check it out. Check it out, man. That's the person that dies. Ask their family, have they eaten red meat in the last month? And you'll find out red meat's killing us. And that's how easy it is to use, non-contextual facts and information to sell your narrative and your agenda. And if that's all you stand for is being right, then you're no better than the people that use coercion tactics in the first place to get us where we are. And I do not trust you anymore with the power that you might gain from winning this battle anyway, because it will only be a battle, because the true war is healing this nation to have responsibility to self-govern ourselves through principle and morals that used to exist. And I've been researching and reading up a lot about the 1215 Magna Carta, but really it was just a document of how to explain what is universal and natural law, what is the what is the way that we should conduct ourselves as a human on this planet, with care and consideration for those around us, for almost, you see it in biblical, do unto others, all of those different things, just with the principles and morals of not wanting to harm other people. The doctor's code for the Nuremberg, for the international thing, I can't remember which one it is, but it was do no harm. First, do no harm. So all of them have a foundation somewhere along the line of just humans not wanting to harm other humans. And so, if our immediate response to everything is kill them all, swing them all, hang them all, at every level. I spoke to a doctor the other day who had been given vaccinations, small local doctor, small town, knows every person by name. Very, very regretfully starting to see the information come out now, and he's got his eyes open and he's diving into it, and he's realised he's made a hell of a mistake and he's been bluffed. So he's angry, very angry. But you would hear from these groups that he will be lynched, that that the people will blame him because he was told by his medical professional societies that he had to do it. If he spoke out about it, he'd lose his license and his job. He also had to be vaccinated. But the way that they would portray this is that once the truth comes out, that township should lynch him and swing him from the town centre, so that everybody would know, and the nurses that were in there with him and the people that were in the, they would all swing. And I'm like, is that it? Is that what you think this world needs? Is that the retribution that will make you sleep well at night? Will that make us a better society or community? Or will it just trigger the families of the people that were left behind, of the people that we murdered, into a Palestine-Israel type situation where an eye for an eye continues to make the whole world blind? What stage, at what stage do we stop and say that it is people that have allowed it to happen, people that have made it happen, and the only thing necessary for evil to prosper is for good people to do nothing, and that has been tried and true and tested for thousands and thousands of years, and will continue to be for thousands and thousands of years if we don't spend most of the time actually looking at ourselves and go, what made me coercible? What makes me controllable? What makes me triggerable? What makes me take decisions of finance that I shouldn't? What makes me buy things from Woolworths and Coles that I don't, that I know that they're the enemy? What makes me bank with the big four because I get a 1.5% cheaper rate than I do with one of the smaller banks? So I know it's going overseas. I know they're nefarious, and I know they made $7+ billion of profit last year in a cost of living crisis. I think that what I was going to come back to you was unity. All right, so everybody calls for unity, and I had a post up the other day, just a random sort of post about unity, and this gentleman come on and said, you're missing a step. You can't go from selfishness. You can't go from a place of ego or a place of defense to unity without finding the true step of self-awareness and self-governance in between. You need to be able to stand on your own, in your own power, and truly understand exactly what we've just been talking about with your discernment, intuition, and intent. You need to absolutely have all of that in check and focus before you'll ever have unity. Because if you don't, you have a bunch of individual people that are fighting for really themselves. They say it's for the country, but I'm fighting for my children, and as a benefit, the country gets a benefit because I'm really fighting for my children. I'll make that pretty clear. And so I'm fighting against the evil. If there was not one other person in this country, but the same corporate structure was in charge of it, and I was the only family here, I would be fighting the same people, and I would be fighting the same way. So, it was always known to me that I'm fighting for my family. So if I don't work on that, and I don't make that clear that this has to be more about understanding my principles and morals of doing no harm to other people, and it's not just about my family, then I go into unity with other groups where if they aren't representing necessarily my beliefs from my family, I would see them as the threat eventually, and I'll start attacking them or chipping them away because I'm still only doing this really for myself and my family through that selfish nature. And that's what he's saying here, is that you need to be able to have that place in the middle where your principles and morals overarch, everything about what this side is and what your family is, and know that, that you are able to truly unite. And uniting pretty much means standing beside people that might do it differently, might talk differently, might walk differently, might dress differently, and none of that matters to you because you know that you are both there in that moment of self-governing principle and moral foundation to get rid of the evil that would do harm to people in this world, your children included. And I hope I did that justice, but that made so much more sense to me to say, we need to stop, and I have been for a long time, but just not in that words, to stop calling for this unity when we don't actually understand the egoic nature and the selfish nature that has been perpetuated by the system for so long. Because unity will never work, because you'll just be clashing all the time. And so you'll if it works, you'll usually end up being because of a dictatorship type leader gets to the top of that unity and then just starts telling people what to do. And because they all still need to be told what to do, they just get a new leader. And govern me harder, govern me harder becomes another power threat. And which why we ended up with two birds and the two wings of the same bird, with the Liberal Labor, type back and forth. It's no different. It's not a different outcome. It's just a different people, but the same. They're still doing the same thing to us, and they have done back and forth.
It's one of the greatest tricks that the powers that be have played on the populace. Is they've gone from a model of dictatorship where I have the power, you have no power. Eventually, that runs out, and people rise up and they fight against it. To exactly the same system, essentially, with the choice and the illusion of power, where you get to go to the polls every 4 years and you get to choose another person to rule you, who's pretty much exactly the same with a slightly different outlook on things, whether it be conservative or left. But you see at the moment with the digital ID and the disinformation bills, these are very well supported by both sides of government. And then you've got the Greens as well, not both sides of government, both sides of both parties. The Greens are all in. You've even got the Teals, the Independents, who seem to be all in on it as well. So you're getting the same shit. You're getting dictatorship in the form of democracy.
Well, there's two things to that. They've tied freedom to finance. Okay, so they've done a really good job of tying your freedom to a financial ability. So everything that's in this country that is free is tied to a financial ability to do that. So you're free to live on the Sunshine Coast, but it's $1 million for the house that I paid $194 now. Right, so it's $1 million for the same house. So you're free to live there, but if you can't afford it, you're also free to live out here in Emerald, where it's $300,000 for a house. Okay, so they say it's a free choice, but the free choice has the consequences of financial burdens. So you can go, you're free to shop at the IGA so that you don't support Woolworths, but the apples over there are $15 a kilo and Woolworths, they're $5 a kilo. So the financial choice of freedom is always really the underpinning thing, which is why we're so easily coercible, because we know that the job is going to be our true freedom. So if you are to lose a little bit of medical freedom to keep your financial income, then you understand that you will keep your life freedom, because freedom is now tied to finance. So people were well and truly willing to lose that little bit of medical freedom for something that they believed that they'd already done multiple times in their life anyway, having vaccinations. They were willing to do that without much thought, even though it wasn't right with their gut, because they've got their heart space turned off, so they're not really communicating well with these three. That's the problem, trauma. Right. So, but that's what the thing was. And that's my opinion of it, is that people were able to think small amount of loss in medical freedom compared to loss of income, which is my financial freedom of everything, where I holiday, where I live, who I hang out with, what I buy, what I wear, all of that. Now in our life, in our country, freedom is money. It's freedom. Your freedom is based on money. And that is the greatest trick that they ever did to convince people that we need money to have freedom. And that is not what, this is not what we were put on this planet for.
Yeah, we view financial as freedom, and they view exactly the same thing as a way to enslave us. And that's the two different ways, the two like completely different things. But it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and they do that. They do it all the time. The light and the dark, the duality of this world is always visible. You can, like I said, you look at you just flip the coin over, and it's always the same coin. There's just the opposite side of it. They understand that really well, because they always tell you they highlight the benefits of the digital ID. One spot, a one place, a one thing. No more all these other systems. Not 20 apps anymore. Just one app, one place to shop it all. Convenience. But then at the same time, over 62 government departments were hacked last year. 4 big banks were hacked, all for data breaches, massive cyber attack data breaches. And so you're like, well, hang on, why aren't you talking more about that? Because I reckon that I'd want to have a 3-year track record of not getting hacked before I'd ever go out to the public and say, this system is safe for you not to get hacked. I'm like, you had 62 departments that got hacked last year. So why would I believe that if I put all my shit in one spot? At least at the moment, the hacker's got to hack 62 places maybe to get 62 bits of information about me. But if they can go to one spot, it's pretty easy to to do it. But this is what they do. Climate change is another one. They whisper in your ear for 10, 20 years that the problem's over there, that there's a problem, there's a storm. And in the meantime, they've been buying up all the umbrella shops, and they continue to, tell you about the storm that's coming, and you're like, there's no storm. I can't see any storm. There's nothing out there. And when it starts raining, which they probably caused, if you know anything about geoengineering, that finally starts raining on your head, and you're looking around going, holy shit, where's my umbrella? And all the umbrella shops are gone, but there's only one place that sells umbrellas, and that's the government. And they say, oh, you do need rain. Well, you just pay us a small amount of tax weekly in there, and we'll provide coverage for you. Here it is. And you say, well, this one's leaking. Oh, well, that's because you need 7 of them for it to work. That's the way that I've been describing the climate hoax lately. So now you've got 7 little umbrellas, with a little, trying not to line up the drippy parts on top of you. You're not quite as safe and effective an umbrella as what they thought they were going to be when you were given the first one. But they tell you those stories, and they just drip feed the lie until it becomes so normal. I've been doing TikTok videos lately just for a bit of fun. I've been busy so I haven't had as much time to research. I've been doing the action stuff. Coming up to next week, starting on the 6th, is a National Action Week for the Aligned Council of Australia. 7 days of small bite-sized pieces for people to take part of. That takes a bit of work. It takes a bit of work in the background, a lot of meetings, a lot of back and to and froing, arm wrestling. So I haven't had the time to do the long content that I have. I'll still do 1 or 2 a week, but not as much. So I've been doing TikTok for fun. And I just say the facts on there. But when you say the little facts like that out loud, yesterday I said, why is it that I get fined if I've got an unroadworthy vehicle, but nobody's accountable in government for letting me drive on an unroadworthy road? And the people that came back, like 1,000 comments have come back just from all over the country going, bro, you know nothing about how shit roads are. You should see it here in Victoria. You should see it here in Sydney. You should see it here in Western Australia. You should see so it's common, but it's not, you just don't quite think about it, because what they do is a ton of straw is still a ton. And they are very good at creating straws and dropping it on the common person. And collectively, that ton weighs you down to the point where you can't quite realize why your back's bent over and breaking under the strain of the weight, because you can only ever sort of go, well, that's just one straw. And they can go, oh, having trouble with the electricity bill? Here's $1,000. And you go, well, it doesn't actually take a lot of the strain off me, but thank you for giving back my tax money to me.
Yeah.
And so
the government's giving it to us.
Yeah, but again, they create the problem, through the mismanagement of our money to put the country in $1.5 trillion worth of debt, when we should be the most prosperous country in the world with our minerals, commodities, resources, precious metals, tourism, farming. We shouldn't want for anything in this country, and we've got $1.5 trillion worth of debt and homeless people on every second street corner. We've got another 500,000 houses to come off fixed interest rate in the next 3 months for the first time in 3 or 4 years since they took their fixed interest rates, and they're going to see a 4.5% interest rate rise. And now inflation supposedly under control at 6% and about to drop. Still never has. And the only time it even did show a negative one in the last 3 months was when they threw a bucket load of money at it in handouts, which helps them, fudge the figures. It was the fuel excise one. And then what do you see now? Then coming out saying that they're most likely going to see at least another 0.5 to 0.75% increase before the end of the year. So it was never going to be an increase. Been waiting for it to turn, and the economists have been saying, oh, any time now the Reserve Bank will drop that, and by 0.25%, we'll start seeing this go back down. And now you see them not. And so you go, well, who's accountable for that? Who at the RBA is in charge of making those predictions and putting it out there? And when they get it wrong, why are they still in business, and why are they still in charge? Because if my finance broker told me for 2 years in a row that my $10,000 investment was going to go up by 10%, and 2 years in a row it went down by 10%, I'd probably call bullshit, and I'd go and take my money and put it somewhere else. But we were told in 2020 that we wouldn't even see an interest rate rise until 2024, and we've had 17 rises since then, and nobody's in trouble.
Yeah.
So, what is that? Where is the accountability from people, and that's why I said we don't have to worry about the misinformation and disinformation bill. We don't have to, people are saying, well, the government is exempt from it. And I said, well, you don't have to worry about them getting it wrong, because they also get to decide what is misinformation and disinformation. So they'll never be convicted of misinformation because they won't think it is.
Yeah. No, they can't be. Neither can the mainstream media corporations. They're exempt from it. But I think a lot of these problems, especially with the economy and with inflation and the fact that nothing is working, is because people don't understand how the economy works in the first place. Because we rely on experts. We take part of our brain and we just give it over to experts. And so people are like, well, the government says inflation's caused by this and this. You notice exactly after sort of COVID ended, which, debatable whether all that stuff's ended yet. The inflation started and they blamed it on Ukraine. And it was shocking to me how many people said, oh, bloody Ukraine, everything's so expensive now. It's like, did you not notice what happened over the 3 years prior to that, where they handed out billions and billions of dollars, which they're now making, I know, at least in Victoria, they're making the people pay it back.
$16 million a day interest on is what we're currently running, I think, in the Victorian debt. 16 million a day in interest. It's a lot of money. Sure, there'll be a lot of people in that. Hey? Unbelievable, isn't it? Unbelievable when you say the figures out loud, and that's what I've been just mucking around with on TikTok, because there's a different type of people there, and they like their information, and they can't retain information in long form, so they like 10-second videos. It's funny, you're watching. There was one, I posted one yesterday that's had 10,000 views, and it shows that even though there's 10,000 people have viewed it, and there's 2,000 that have liked it or something like that, the average watch time is still to watch the whole video is still under 20%, and like they're 13-second videos. So people can't even when they like it, and they cannot even watch till the end of the video before they've got to scroll, because that's just, they're just trained that the moment their brain is not getting candy, they scroll. And so, and it's funny because I like learning how to do videos and better, and I like to learn because I like being able to understand what drives the human, because it's if you're going to be talking to the masses, and you're going to be trying to influence people to wake up and look at themselves and educate themselves and that sort of stuff, you've got to understand the thing that the driving forces behind that too. You can't just sort of say, this is my way, this is my way, this is my way. I mean, it's not going to work. You've got to understand what makes people tick, because that's what they do. I mean, that's what MK Ultra and all those things are for. That's what predictive programming, that is what all of these subtle indoctrinated programming that they've done over the last 70 years. And what do you know, that most of these things all kicked off, the UN's, the World Health Organizations, they all kicked off after the war. And I don't know why. I'm not 100% sure, but I think when you look at the blood and guts that the American people and the Australian people, defended their people with, it was almost at that time it was like, we're going to have to demasculate these pricks. Do you know what I mean? Like, these men are men. Do you know what I mean? So we're going to have to really sort of work on making sure there's no men left in this country to stand for the country. We're going to have to soften these pricks up. We're going to have to make life pretty good for them for the next. It'll take 3 generations, but through school and through gender equality and through chemicals like phthalates in the severely in the plastic, severely taking away testosterone, through the removal of cholesterol in diets, which is a major transporter for the 5 hormones that we need to to have regulated in our mind. Like there's all of these things that have just been
testosterone relies on that stuff to
And now, 40 years later, after the big science pays for that food triangle to say cholesterol's so bad and that sugar's better, once we grow it, crush it, bleach it, and feed it to you, compared to the fat that comes free off the side of the meat or the avocado or the egg, that comes free in there as nature intended it. Remove that and put some sort of phenylalanine or aspartame product in there to make it better. 40 years later, and we now see doctors handing out carnivore diets or keto diets, and nobody's holding the medical professionals to account. Like, hang on, what he's talking about? Like, how many people committed suicide for mental health issues caused by those diseases or those toxicities or those lacks of cholesterol, which leads to hormone imbalances, which leads to depression, anxiety, and that sort of stuff. How many people committed suicide because she's got it wrong, and nobody's talking about it? You know what I mean? Like you go into the doctor now and I'm overweight, and they're like, "Oh, you should try the keto diet. Ketogens are this, and take this ketogenic powder, and it'll help you." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? That's high fat, high cholesterol diet. That's how do you flip a coin? How do you just flip it like that and say, oh, the science now says that it's more profitable? I mean, it's more, it's like that." And people just go, yeah, cool. Like last year, you walked in there last year, low cholesterol, keep your cholesterol down. You've got a high cholesterol score, keep that down, eat low fat products. And then this year, you walk back in there and go, okay, well, that hasn't worked, and you're obese and your mental health is poor and it's not really working out for you. So maybe we're going to flip the opposite side and do that. And oh, well, look at that. It's working out really well. A high cholesterol diet, ketogens running through, and now you're fit, healthy, and fabulous. Like if only we had done that 40 years ago. But
people trust their doctors because they think they're experts, but they're not. They're parrots, and that's proof just there. They're parrots. They parrot the science of the times. Whatever the science is created generally by companies, which then fund the universities, which then train the doctors, and then the doctors only get jobs and they only move up in the ranks if they do whatever the companies tell them to do. So, going back to your point before about doctors, they're not bad people. They're just parrots, and they parrot the science to keep their jobs.
Well, and we are raised in a schooling system, indoctrinated schooling system that says if you can read that, remember it, and write it down over there, you are smart. That's the principle of school. If you can read that, remember it, and write it down over there, you are smart. You get an A.
Yep.
And if you don't, you get a D, and you are dumb. And so you will have a dumb job. I've got a video on it. Welcome to our planet, where I say, imagine we open our first international dimensional space station, and 2 squid people from the Squid Nebula jump off the ship, and they say, "Oh," we say, welcome to the planet," and they're like, "Well, thank you." And you're like, and they say, "What are you here for?" And they're like, "Well, we're thinking about raising some little squiddies, and you've got a lot of ocean here, and we heard this is a pretty nice place, and what do you do in this place?" Well, for the first 5 years, we can tell all of our kids fictional stories about these rainbows and butterflies and Santas and tooth fairies and that sort of stuff, and we let them believe that anything is possible in this world. But when we get to about 5 or 6 years old, we tell them to shut up and stop with that rubbish, and none of that exists, and we take all that away from them, almost in time to debilitate them as we put them into our indoctrination system. Where for the next 9 or 10 years, they're told to get to work, get there at a certain time, wear a certain thing, sit down, shit when they're told to, eat when they're told to, and only think a certain way. They've got to remember that, and they've got to put it in there. If they do that, they'll get a mark. And if they get the right mark, they'll be able to go on to the next 6 years of indoctrination process, where at the other end of it, after 14 or 15 years of heavy indoctrination, they'll have a certificate to say that they're intelligent, and their life will be perfect, and everybody else will have a dumb job, doing the dumb shit. And somewhere in the future, 10 years on, you'll see the CEO sitting in the building, and you'll see the cleaner here. They went to school together, and the CEO's life won't be that great, and nor will the cleaner. He'll have his house that he can't quite afford, and this one will have his house that he can't quite afford. There'll be a fair difference between the zeros in the back of that thing, but they'll both be looking at each other going, geez, I wish I was the CEO. And he's like, God, I wish my life was as simple as you, the cleaner. And I said, we'll do that until we're 55, 60-year-old. And if we're still able-bodied to move around, we'll jump in a van and maybe do one lap of Australia before we're dead. They bury us in the ground. And the squid people go, and they call the international cab and they get the hell out of here, because none of that makes sense. That's how we live our life on this planet. None of it. Your dreams and reality are burnt to death in school, and you are dumber every day that you come out of that place, because you are systematically being trained that there is only one way to live, and that is inside the slave race.
Yep. I love that story. That's great. That's fantastic. And you just said you've pulled your kids out of school and homeschooling. We've just done the same. Well, one is homeschooling now, and the other one's at a Steiner school, which teaches more traditional values, and kids learn by play, which is fantastic. But I implore everybody, please look at the public schooling system. And if you need a little bit of literature to get you over the line, I recommend a book called Dumbing Us Down by a guy called John Taylor Gatto. And if you haven't read that, give it a read, because it's he's a historian, essentially, goes through exactly how it happens and why it happened, and why you should get your kids out of school and start teaching them real life lessons.
Yeah, and that's the problem. It's a straw analogy again. Like the same time they took the dollar off the gold standard, which allowed them to start printing money, which causes inflation to devalue our dollar, is the same time they start running campaigns like, getting women out of the house and empowering them to be equal in the workplace. I'm all for women in the workplace. They can work any job that they want. But why is it that they never did anything in the background to make sure that the system was set up that every woman that went to the work allowed a man to go back and be the home carer? Because that was never the intent, because they really were hiding from the fact that we were going to need more and more money to be able to live, as the capital prices of our properties and the affordability of everything was continuing to go through the roof. So they used the women, they used feminism as a weapon to get everybody comfortable with two people being in the income stream, because we never really did much better about it. Do you know what I mean? If you could afford a property, you've had the capital gain, but it's at the expense of our future for our children. Because my house that I bought for 194 grand at the start of this just sold the other day in Budrum, the exact house for $1,050,000. Now, my daughter lives on the Sunshine Coast. She rents, and she earns about 10 grand less than what I did at the same relative age. So I bought mine for 194. She's now got to come up with more than the price of the house for a deposit. And that is the sad reality, is that, that is purely from selling out to other countries. We let 800,000 immigrants into this country in the last year. Why? Why do we need them? Because their birth certificate, their tax is the backer for our dollar. So we know we're causing more inflationary issues. We know we're causing more housing crisis issues. They do. But they have to continue to let them in, because we don't have manufacturing, we don't have gold, we don't have anything backing our dollar anymore. They're just trying to offset what they're doing, playing it out quite nicely for the catastrophic failure of our dollar that is coming, to be replaced with a CBDC, a one world government, a new world order, a World Economic Forum-led, alliance to make sure that you will own nothing and you will be happy. And like my wife said yesterday, you already own nothing. 80% of the people, if you turn them upside down in this country and shake them, they own nothing. The banks own it all. We are loaned to our tits. We have credit cards for our ass. We have debt everywhere. But there are so many people in this country that own nothing already. She said all we're looking for really with Klaus is just the be happy part. Because he's got the first part. They've got the first part through usury lockdown.
Definitely. Yeah, you're right. Nobody really owns anything, do they? You put down a deposit on a house. It's going to be 30 years till you pay that thing off, and in the meantime, you're just paying rent to the bank, who technically own your house. So, and then you don't really own the land either, because the government can come along any time and say they're going to build a freeway through your land, and they'll take it off you. So,
well, that's something I've learnt too, is that they're very good at putting things in place today that sound like it's going to hurt rich people and only hurt rich people. And so all of the masses let it happen because they're like, yeah, take money off the rich people. But then if you continue to inflate and capital gain your wealth and property, it's not long before the middle class actually, 10 years later, the middle class's dollar value actually hits the same trigger point that law does, because the law doesn't inflate the law. If they set it at $500,000 for land tax, it stays at $500,000. But 10 years ago, a block that was worth $200,000 is now worth $500,000. So a middle class family that owned a block at $200,000 is now going to start getting taxed on land tax at $500,000, because we were quite comfortable with it 10 years ago, because it was only rich people with investments that were going to get it. But the money didn't inflate for, that line doesn't inflate for CPI and for capital gains sort of things. So they deliberately put it in place so that you can, you're in the future, middle class will be getting taxed heavily on what used to just be a middle class investment asset. So they're very good at doing it, and we're so busy that even the smartest of the people that get out of the system and go into business end up in busyness. That's all they want. They just want us to be tired. They just want us to be worn out, and they just want us to come home. And the biggest thing with the news is they're very good at giving you, they only show you the 5% of either side. So they only show you the very extreme of the left and the very extreme of the right. So when you're busy all day long and you want to look at the news, you will eventually turn the news off deliberately, right? Because they want you to not look at the news. Everybody thinks that we're doing a good job of getting rid of the mainstream media, but the mainstream media, we don't want to get rid of them. We should be trying to retake them over. And we've done that in some degree with the mainstream social media that we now see. But at the end of the day, we're still doing it in that too. Is that the real conversations is this: me and you, we're the 80% in the middle. All right, so we're the masses. We're the normal people in this world that we don't necessarily have to agree on everything. You might be a bit more right and I'm a bit more left, or you might be a bit more anything that we not necessarily be exactly the same, but we're still in the normal in the middle. But because they only show you the 10% on either end of it, the 5 to 10% of the crazy, the ones that are screaming, cut all children's babies off, cut their penises off because they wore a dress for the day, and the other end saying there is, God only made two, so they put those two either end. And I don't care in the middle. If you're 18-year-old and you want to change your sex or whatever, okay, but come for the children and it's a different conversation with me. But what they do is they make sure that only the loudest and the craziest of the furthest ends of the scale are talking on the microphones, and that makes people turn off because you don't want to listen to that shit. All right, so you're either inadvertently living in a world of fear, or you're just turning off completely. And so somewhere in there, they'll tell you what's going on with the news, but you've just turned off. You're not getting that information anymore. And there's so much information out there. I listen to 5 hours. 5 hours. No, I'll probably be down to like 2 hours a day of listening to things. I'd have to say 2 hours a day, but I was easily 5 hours a day for a long time. At the moment, my eyes would wake up at 4 a.m. on my way to work. I'd listen to an hour on the way to work, an hour at the gym, hour at lunch, 2 hours when I got home. Even just during the day at work, I listened to, like I was typing documents at work one day and I listened to 6 hours of the Royal Pandemic terms of reference, just taking that data in there. So yeah, if you can't take that amount of information in, you're forced to listen to snippets, and the snippets always sound like the world is crazy. The police are battening and shooting people all the time. They might have 100 million interactions with humans in Australia each day, easily. And yet you'll only see the one on there that says that they treated someone badly, arrested someone, or belted someone. You know what I mean? Like, they love making us feel like it's clickbait worthy, that the world is chaotic and that everybody's crazy. And if the left starts way up here and the right starts way up there, and there's nothing in between. The moment you cross that line, that you're on the other side. And you're like, hang on, bullshit. I don't know. I can. There's a lot of room in the middle to be completely normal people with just varying degrees of differences in our, ideology or our beliefs. And the principles and the morals still will underpin that with the same reality that, you might think the sky is aqua and I might think it's, blue. Like, it just different ways that we explain things, but that doesn't mean that it's either, it's either this or it's that. And if it's not, we need to spear each other to death because we don't agree. Like, that's what they're really good at, making us feel divided. You're either this side or you're that side.
I think me and Robin always joke about it. We say, if you're not far left, you're far right. It's the way it is. There's nothing in between there. You couldn't fit a playing card in between those two things if you listen to the mainstream media.
That's why they hate these conversations. They hate conversations with people like us that live normal, that live normal everyday life, not high flying, socialites rubbing shoulders with the biggies. We are just the average. That I'm the average Aussie. And yes, I've led a life that people would go, that's not average. You've had a farm and a business and that sort of stuff. I mean, that it's average because it's possible for everybody to do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't have to have any training to do it. I didn't have to go to university to do it. You know what I mean? Like, it literally is possible for people to do that, just to start budgeting, start looking at themselves, start educating themselves. Like, I haven't watched a single game of rugby league this year, not a pass. And I am the biggest rugby league fan in the world. And am I missing it? Absolutely not, because I stopped drinking alcohol and realised last year, as to the later half of the season, I was sitting there with a beer watching football, and I stopped drinking. And the later half of the season, I'm sitting here watching football, and I'm like, this is boring as shit. Like, I'm just like looking around, and my daughter would be outside playing, and I'd be like, what are you up to? And she's like, hitting a rock with a stick. Bet you I could hit it further. Bet you can't. And so I just got up and we'd go outside and play outside or do something different, go for a walk, take the dogs, learn something, like read a book. I don't gamble. I haven't gambled since Melbourne Cup last year. I usually gamble every couple of weeks. I'll be sitting there watching the football and they'll be like, oh, Belly Bob's going to be the first try scorer. I'll get $5, 5 to 1. And I'll be like, and then so all of those things just start peeling away when you actually have your mind and soul. And because I'm not getting drunk on a Friday night, drinking 10 beers, wake up the next day, let's go and get KFC. I haven't had KFC or Macca's or anything like that either for a year. Now, there's lots of people out there that'll be like, oh, I haven't had it for 5 years, or I haven't had it for 10 years, or I've never had it. Like, they start barking their statistics at you, like
try to one up you.
Yeah, like the two cats, we call them. At work, two cats. They've always got two cats. If you've got one cat, they've always got two. But it's like, again, it's like, I'm not trying to justify. I don't need to justify anything to you, the viewer, or you, the fellow Australian. I'm constantly measuring and reminding myself what I stand for, how far I've come, and where do I want to go. And that's I don't know. That's a pretty good way to wrap up. For me, is, are you making yourself accountable? How far of a head start have you used the time since you woke up to COVID? How far have you got in front of the competition by using the information to make sure you're never coercible or controllable again? Because if you have spent all your time blaming them, allowing yourself to be the victim of what they did to you, have you really removed yourself from control, or are you just looking for now a new controller to come and win the day for you because you like this controller better than the last controller? Because at the end of the day, it's still control. You know what I mean? That's in history, there's always a savior that comes in. He's for the people. They're for the people. They give back some of your gold, and then they find a new way 100 years later. So are we winning a battle, or are we looking to win the war? Most people that are the victim want to win the battle. They don't realize that all they're doing is pushing the war to their grandchildren. So they think they're standing for them, but all they're doing is making the selfish decision to find today's enemy, put a new leadership structure in place, a new slave master, and push that same problem down the road for their grandchildren. Will have to be fighting the same fight as their great-grandparents did, as their great-great-grandparents did, be it through World War II, World War One, or anything that you see in history. That's my belief.
Yep. No, thoroughly enjoy that. It was a really, really great chat. And just to tie it up, I think one thing I got out of the chat is that, sometimes things seem like they're a little bit overwhelming. Actually, most of the time they do, especially for most people in the country, myself included. You feel like you need to make a big change. You need to go after the government. You need to do this. You need to do that. So you are more likely to rely on someone else to do it. Say putting a new leader into government. But if we just all worked on, like you said, trying to change ourselves and trying to be the best version of ourselves, and to really be honest and think, what have I actually done? Imagine if everybody did that. If everybody just changed themselves and didn't worry about anything else and just changed themselves, we'd become ungovernable. We all would. And that would be the easiest way to do it. But to get that out there, it seems to be the hardest thing to do. But if you just don't have the brains like Jody does, where he can actually take in this information and make the changes himself, because I think you undersell yourself a bit as being just a regular bloke, because not many people can do what you're doing, especially with the information coming in. What you can do is you can go to his Facebook page. Is that the best place to sort of for anybody to follow?
I'm across all platforms. But I do my lives on Facebook. It's an easy place to share. So under Jody Lowe, I help out with the Aussie Fight Back Club. But you can find me on Aussie Fight Back Club. You'll find me there on Facebook. You'll find me at Aussie Fight Back Club at YouTube, at X, at BitChute, at Telegram, and Rumble is still called Average AF because they won't allow you to change the name on there. But yeah, if you look for Aussie Fight Back Club on any of your channels that you like, most of them will have TikTok is obviously where I only post the short videos where I'm just being a sarcastic prick to invoke conversation. But every other one of those platforms, you'll just get the long versions. And if I'm a long-winded person, as you can see. I can talk quite easily for a very long time. Most of my lives are, and I'll talk about 15 different topics during that course of that live. So it's hard if you're in the educational stage where you're still trying to learn and work out what the hell's going on. I'm not the guy for you because I talk about all things like they are all things. But if you go to your favorite, YouTube or Rumble or BitChute sort of place, you can see what my content, what I've sort of named it down the side. At least it might have a bit of a climate change flavor. It might have a bit of a spiritual flavor. But again, most of the time you'll find that they're either spiritually activating you, physically activating you, intellectually activating you, financially activating you, or emotionally activating you. So that's why you'll see that flavor across all five of them. Some days I'll be talking about spiritual ascension, sun, solar flares, vibration, frequency, energy. And other days I'll be talking about climate change because we're talking about water, and the next day I'll be just talking about emotional maturity and triggerability and how we need to, actively go inside of ourselves. And then the next day we'll be having discussions about, like I did a 3.5-hour live the other day on the 1215 Magna Carta. That's a long one and a lot of information, but at the end of the day, I like to talk to all things to make us aware that we need to know a little bit of everything, not a lot about one thing, because it usually causes an imbalance. And so if you're focusing on one thing because you get some sort of gratification out of it, you get some sort of heartfelt sugar response because you're really good at being in the physical, sooner or later you are creating a negative debt that has to be paid. And when the toll comes to be paid, you won't be ready for it and it'll tip you over. So I think that you can find lots of different talking points and just different ways to think. And like I said, I'm blessed that I was a blank canvas. So I don't believe I've got a brain that's any bigger than anyone else's. I just didn't have that precursor. The the lack of education from a family unit, the lack of that, what most people would want to have a strong family core. I didn't have that. They were doing their thing. I was just along for the ride. So that's what set me up to be able to take all this information in freely without having to really fight against that hard, family indoctrinated sort of, this is the way that it is sort of thing. So that's a blessing. So that's not about me having a bigger brain or anything. That's just luckily having a clean slate. So I pity. I understand. I empathize with people that have to not only learn all of this shit again, but remove so many ingrained, rooted, things inside themselves to actually be able to replace that with the new information. And you got to clean out the old hard drive to put in the new data. It's not easy at all.
No, it's a real Matrix moment, isn't it? When you get the tube pulled out of the back of your head and wake up in a in a pool of gel, whatever it is. It is like that moment. That movie's been so good for so many analogies like that. But
yes.
Yeah, but look, follow Jody, what he's doing. I think he's doing some great stuff. There is a bit going on. I won't get you to go into it because I'll just refer everybody to the ACA webinar that you had the other night, where we do talk about a lot of that. And that is, if you're following us on Rumble or YouTube or even on this podcast, we listen to audio only, it is on there. I think will be the last episode you'll see. So Jody's got a little segment on there where you speak for about 15, 20 minutes about it. But other than that, follow him and join in. Just do one thing. And while I'm actually here, I'm about to go out with my son shortly and post these out to the surrounding community. Now, this is from the ACA. If you haven't got these yet, easy to do. Go and download them from the site, the Aligned Council of Australia. Just Google it or Brave search, whatever, and go download it, print them out. If you don't have a printer, just go to Officeworks. It won't cost you that much, or they will send it to you. So just go and do it now, though, because we don't have much time before this is all happening, which is at the end of May, is it, Jody?
So the Pandemic Preparedness Treaty vote is at the end of May, and Action Week starts next Monday. So every day is a different activity, from emailing your federal members to throw out the trash day. So you'll see we love massive. I make these massive big bin stickers that we've been sticking on their bins. They actually look like the council sort of stickers. So it's actually quite funny watching everybody around the country sticking these big 30 centimeter stickers on the bins, but it says exit the WHO, the WEF, and the UN on the front of them. And then there's a meet at the federal MP day. That's next Friday. So everywhere in every electorate, we want as many people as possible to show up to their federal members' workplace and put some pressure on them and say what's going on. There's plenty of details of what to take and what to talk about there. But 11 a.m. get along to them. There's a huge national press conference on the Saturday. There's the Hoist Your Flag Day on the Monday, just calling out May Day and what May Day actually stands for, and understanding that even our flags, even standing under the blue flag has turned out to be a total load of horse shit. That the red flag is actually what our grandfathers and great grandfathers fought under for this country. That was for the people, not the corporate blue flag. So just things like that start conversations about just how far we've been dragged down this lying chamber. And it's a good way to meet people, good way to emphasize. And like I said, the ACA for me is where we create a smorgasbord of selections, so that if you're time poor, finance poor, physically active poor, if you don't have the ability to move around, leave the home or something like that, then you can choose, make the choice in that week of how you get involved. And if you can do all of them like I will, that's great.
Beautiful. Well, I hope everybody gets involved. And just follow Jody, as I said, and keep up to date with what we're doing here as well. Stand Up Australia working pretty closely with the ACA, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Jody.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.